Hello BookTube. Today I'm going to be doing the N is for Novella tag. This is part of the Alphabet Soup collection of tags created by Sean the Book Maniac. And a link to his original video will be down below. Before I begin with the tag though, quick update. I didn't make a video yesterday because there really wasn't much to talk about, but I'm thinking I'm going to be trying to do a lot more tags, particularly where I can show books, because it'll give me the opportunity to walk around my bedroom, book room, and pick out books, which will give me some extra exercise. I'm not entirely sure how much exercise I'll be able to do in the foreseeable future. The county where I live issued a shelter-in-place order yesterday, which went into effect for today. So yeah, and while I think I can do some exercise and maybe run up to my bank and check the ATM, get a bank statement from the ATM, probably not the smartest idea. So I think I'll probably just stay home and try to get what exercise I can here, which is not entirely impossible. I know of several people who have basically exercise through dancing or whatever, so I might try to do that. But anyway, and also there's always doing tags where I can take books off of my shelves. So, yeah. Anywho, let's get on with this tag. N is for Novella, the last good one you read. I'm going to go with, and I am blanking on the name right now. What? Oh, Enchantress of Venus. Yeah, so I'm going to go with Enchantress of Venus. Although I read this in the space opera Renaissance, I decided to pull out the best of Leigh Brackett. So the Enchantress of Venus is a Eric John Stark novella. Although maybe with today's definition, it might not technically be a novella, although I personally consider it a novella. A lot of what is now considered novellas, I would consider short novels. I mean, if it's like 150 to 200 pages, it's really a short novel. A novella is like 150 pages or less. But that's my definition. But anyway, getting back to The Enchantress of Venus, it's a Eric John Stark story where he is searching for a close friend of his and discovers him in a tyrannical backwater led by this declining old Venusian noble family, and how that family eventually collapses. It is probably, I would say, a combo of early space opera and Southern Gothic, now that I think about it. So, yeah. N is for Neighbor, a work of fiction focused on at least... Wait, let me redo this one. N is for Neighbor, a work of fiction focused on, or at least largely concerned with, neighbors. I'm going to go with The Murder at the Vicarage. I don't have an individual book for that, so I'm just going to hold up one of my Agatha Christie omnibuses. So, The Murder at the Vicarage is the first Miss Marple novel. It is one of a few that are actually set at St. Mary Mead, and one of the key points of the novel is that the neighbors of the vicar, or the vicarage, are instrumental in solving the crime. Obviously, Miss Marple is the direct neighbor of the Vicarage, but the other neighbors provide important clues, or red herrings, as the case may be. Prompt number 3. N is for name. A writer you'd recommend whose first name and or last name starts with N. I'm going to go with Peter Newman. This is the Vagrant, the first book in his Vagrant trilogy. It's really rather good. It's post-apocalyptic epic fantasy with a heavy dose of grimdark. I read it a few years ago and quite liked it, and I really want to go back to it and also read the other books in the trilogy. Book number 4. N is for Nuptials. A work of fiction that didn't suck about a wedding. I'm going to go with The Wedding in Peter McLean's Priest of Bones, book 1 in the War for the Rose Throne series. So, as I've mentioned before, the War for the Rose Throne series is basically a fantasy version of Peaky Blinders. And so in this book, spoiler warning, Thomas Piety, who's the leader of the Pious Men, and he's done some work for the secret organization called the Queensmen, who are basically like a combination of MI5 and MI6. And he's gone off to war, and he's returned with his army company and his brother's army company. And they discover that their territory, before the war, were the leaders of a gang called the Pious Men. And they've discovered that their territories have shrunk to nothing, that they have come home to nothing. So Thomas is concerned mostly with restoring the family fortunes, his position, his power. So he takes back his inns and other businesses he ran before he left to war. At the same time, he is pressed into renewed service to the Queensmen. One of the rival gangs in the city is controlled by an agent of a rival power. And the city would be sort of a linchpin for any invasion. So Thomas is basically given resources and tactical assistance by an agent of the Queensmen to further her own, the national agenda. As part of the cover, the agent pretends to be a barmaid, and gradually she appears to become the lover of Thomas, and eventually they marry at the climax. Now, the wedding does not suck because her wedding present to Thomas is the bomb. It is spectacular. Just absolutely spectacular. So just, yes, definitely the wedding of Thomas Piety, and I am blanking on her name. Let me check it real quick. Alsa is just fantastic. Prompt number 5. N is for not aging well. A book you like less than when you last read it. I'm going to go with Wilkie Collins' The Moonstone. I read this first when I was in 8th grade, I want to say. And I think I've read it once since then, after I graduated from college. And I read it in October for Victober. One of 2 or 3 books I read for Victober. And on this reading, I was just not feeling it. I was impatient. I was just, not entirely thrilled with this book. And it stinks. Because, I know I've liked it before. If I didn't like it, I would not have read it a second time, let alone a third. So I don't know why exactly I just was not really there for it this time, or last time. I might give it another go sometime in the future, but for now, I don't know why, but this didn't seem to have aged well for me. Prompt number 6. N is for N, a book with lots of N's. I'm going to go with Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. Obviously there is 1, 2, and 3 N's in the title. Although 4 if you count the first name. I'm not entirely... I didn't like this. I read it in last December, didn't particularly care for it. I thought maybe if basically in an alternate reality where Gideon escaped when she tried to escape in the first chapters, and the character who is hero would have been a different character, and then the hero of the book be main antagonist, whatever. I think it would have been a much better book had this been like a indentured servant, escaped serf hunt, rather than, yes, I'm going to make you accompany me to this sort of tournament thing where there's other competitors are dying, and we're kind of sort of going to have a questionably, a romantic relationship with questionable consent on your part, and I did not particularly care for this book at all. Prompt number 7. N is for not sure. A book you keep changing your mind about whether you want to read or not. I do not have this book here. I'm going to go with Docile by K.M. Szpara. So, reasons for reading this book. It is one of the very few science fiction and fantasy books by major publishers that feature queer male characters as anything above supporting characters. On the negative side is the premise. Basically, the main character is forced somehow or other into debt slavery for a certain period of time. And his master is basically using him as a sex slave. And I'm not really there for that, especially since it seems like the main character eventually does fall in love with his master. And just no. Yeah. So that part, just because I've never liked that kind of story. So, yeah, I'm leaning towards no. Prompt number 8. N is for nitpick. Some small literary, writing, or book-related thing that drives you around the bend. I'm going to go with too many point of view characters. Where so a lot of fantasy books nowadays tend to have third person limited, wherein a lot of point of view characters, a lot of sort of threads that eventually either at the end of the book or at the end of the series will all converge at one ending. But oftentimes, do they really lead anywhere? Do they really advance the narrative? An example would be A Song of Ice and Fire, where, at the end of, when everything is said and done, when A Dream of Spring is finally released, how many of the point of view characters, will have really not advanced the plot at all? They were just filling to basically allow each book to be about the size of The Lord of the Rings. Another example would be The Root by Naman Gobert-Tillahan, which I do kind of like, but it would have been much better if the main two characters, who I'm blanking on their names right now, were just the POV character. They were just the POVs, rather than, particularly when it came to the male character, in the real world setting, where it was like everybody had a point of view chapter, and it just like, it's too cluttered. Ultimately, prompt number 9. N is for Next to Nothing. A book you read as an adult you can barely remember a blessed thing about. I'm going to go with Yasunari Kawabata's Sound of the Mountain. I read this probably well over 10 years ago, and I don't remember much about it. I remember rather liking it at the time, but I haven't read it since. So probably a book I need to revisit. Although, probably, I'm not at the stage where thinking about unhauling or purging my collection, because this book does have some sentimental value, but I don't remember much about it, which stinks. Prompt number 10. N is for New Zealand. A book or writer you'd like to read from there. Find out about one if need be. It'll be fun. I'm kind of sort of going to cheat. Obviously, one example I could pull up was for the BookTube prize, so I'm not going to mention it because I also don't have it in my collection. But I did read another book that is tangentially washes up on New Zealand, and that is Wild Sea, A History of the Southern Ocean by Joy McCann. New Zealand is, located, I think, at least in the northern boundaries of the Southern Ocean, so it counts. Although that said, there does need to be a lot more New Zealand literature and books on New Zealand coming out. N is for Nodding Off. A mind-numbingly boring book. There is no more mind-numbingly boring book than The Norton Anthology of Literary Criticism. I was an English lit major, and as such, at the end of my undergraduate, and this I got for one of my first classes as a MA student, is you need like a literary criticism, or literary theory, so you can have the interpretive strategies you would need to analyze, interpret the works of literature you are reading. But they can be mind-numbingly boring. The bits of Plato's Republic where he touches on literary criticism is incredibly boring. Jacques Derrida. Oh, good lord. If I had a grammatology, I would have used grammatology. So, yeah. Prompt number 12. The next book you're going to read. I'm not entirely sure. So I'm currently reading Big Wonderful Thing, A History of Texas. And that probably will go another whole week. I'm thinking. I'm thinking I should be finished by Sunday, but it might go into next week. So I'm thinking the next book, I might either go with Broken Shadow by Jaine Fenn. This is a sequel to Hidden Sun, which I quite liked. So I'm hoping my unsettled reading relationship with fiction, or at least with fantasy, might be cleared up enough so I can enjoy reading this. Or I might go ahead and start on Fire and Blood, the European Civil War, 1914 to 1945 by Enzo Traverso, which I've been looking forward to reading for quite a while, and now might be the time. So, and finally, if you have yet to, I don't know who all has or has not done this tag, so if you have not done this tag yet and you want to, consider yourselves tagged. I will see you all again soon. Excuse me, and until then, thank you, BookTube, and stay safe.